This is 2020's Chemical Hearts. Warning, spoilers ahead. Our story begins with a guy named Henry. He's a typical 17-year-old high school student. He's a romantic and dreams of finding his first true love, which he is yet to meet. You all know the type. He also enjoys writing, but laments that there's nothing exciting in his life to write about. Nevertheless, he decides to follow his passion and apply for the position of editor-in-chief of the school newspaper. So, behold, a melodramatic teenage story. When Henry applies for the job, he meets Grace, a transferred student from East River, where she spent 2 years writing for the Gazette. The newspaper faculty advisor informs them that he wants both of them to do the job since they're so talented and would make a great editor-in-chief duo. However, Grace declines the offer, saying she doesn't want to be an editor and leaves the room. Well, that was a bit strange. I guess she can't stand competition or something? Anyway, Henry conveniently misses the school bus and ends up walking home with Grace. Halfway home, Grace offers Henry a ride since she lives nearby. He agrees, then asks her about a poem she was reading earlier. He admits he only read a couple lines, but he thought it was beautiful. Grace hands him the book so he can finish the poem. As they approach her car, Grace gives Henry the keys and asks him to drive, explaining that she doesn't like driving for some reason. When they get to Henry's house, they say their goodbyes, and Grace walks home, leaving her car behind. At home, Henry is greeted by his family. He lives with his parents and his older sister Sadie. After a brief chat with them, he retreats to his room to Google some photos of Grace. No, not with any naughty thoughts. Don't get this wrong. Just a harmless glance at his new love interest. He then reads the poem Grace gave him, then goes to bed thinking about her. The next day, Henry learns that Grace has changed her mind and she is joining the newspaper. During a paper team meeting, the faculty advisor outlines the team's work plan. They need to make 4 issues of the newspaper for the year, including a final edition where they must show their best creativity. After classes, Henry hurries to talk with Grace again, eager to share his thoughts on the poem. They ride home together again. Later that evening, before going to bed, Henry sees a man come and get Grace's car to drive it home. The next day, Henry asks her if she wants to hang out together, but Grace doesn't seem to be much interested. Seconds later, she quickly changes her mind and offers to meet him later that evening at this place and asks him to bring a loaf of bread. After meeting up, Grace takes Henry to an abandoned factory. A little bit of an unusual place for the first time hanging out together, but Henry doesn't seem to mind. Inside, they head down to a pool filled with koi fish. After feeding the fish some bread, Grace opens up a little, telling Henry about her injury from a recent car accident and sharing some of her worldview. However, when Henry tries to dig deeper into her past, Grace shuts down, saying she's tired and wants to go home. She leaves Henry alone in the factory. Back home, Henry, for some reason, breaks one of his pots and starts gluing it back together. Yeah, turns out it's a form of Japanese art called kintsugi, where broken ceramics are repaired with lacquer mixed with gold or silver powder. The more you know. A moment later, Henry's sister Sadie interrupts him. She starts talking about how breakups can negatively impact the human brain and nervous system, causing actual physical pain. This leads her to talk about her recent breakup with her boyfriend, and she starts crying. Henry consoles her. The next day, while talking to his friends about Grace, one of them suggests he should follow her to find out where she keeps disappearing to, implying she might be seeing someone else. Henry laughs it off, saying he's not going to stalk her. And guess what? Right! This is exactly what he does next. Henry follows Grace to a local cemetery where he sees her laying some flowers on a grave. The grave belongs to her ex-boyfriend Dominic, who went to the same school as Grace and was a promising football player. He died in the car accident that also left Grace injured. The next time Henry meets Grace, he tries to discuss ideas for their final newspaper issue, but Grace seems completely uninterested. Later, Henry gets a text from a friend saying that Grace was spotted at the stadium doing some hella weird stuff. Sounds serious. Henry rushes to the stadium where he finds Grace struggling to jog around the track. Okay, based on the text, I expected her to be doing something really wild, like being drunk and stripping in front of a football team or something. Guess running is now considered hella weird. I don't know. Anyway, it's clear that Grace is having a hard time. Her injury is still bothering her. She eventually collapses, then angrily hits her injured leg with a crutch in frustration. Sure, Grace, go ahead. That'll definitely help with the healing. Also, next time you cut your finger or something, don't forget to use salt as antiseptic. Henry later texts Grace to make sure she's okay. She asks to meet him at the library the next day. There, Grace suggests a topic for their final newspaper issue: teenage limbo. It's about the struggles and suffering teenagers go through, portraying teenage years as a limbo between childhood and adulthood. The rest of the newspaper team is enthusiastic about the idea and dives into research. Over the next few days, Henry and Grace grow closer. She begins to open up more about herself and her past, though it's clear she's still holding back. At some point, Grace asks to visit Henry at his house. He introduces Grace to his parents and he leads her upstairs. Henry puts on music and tells her a little about his kintsugi hobby. As things start to get intimate, Grace suddenly pushes Henry away when a song plays. The same song that used to play when they were in the car together. She gets really mad and storms out of the house, and Henry follows her. Grace explains that the song reminds her of her ex and the accident. She cries, kisses Henry, then pushes him away again. When Henry offers to help her, she tells him she's too messed up and that she's not one of his vases to be fixed like that. Well, that escalated quickly. Seriously though, I know she's traumatized and all, but I don't think you need to be that impulsive all the time. After the incident, Henry isn't too excited about attending a Halloween party, but quickly changes his mind when he hears there will be some weed. At the party, Henry gets stoned and turns into a zombie for some reason. Or maybe it's the lighting? Anyway, he then spots Grace. They have a little chat, dance, and the night ends on a sexual note in Henry's bedroom. I'm surprised there was no drama this time. Thought she would snap again at the last minute or something. 2 days later, Grace unexpectedly shows up at Henry's house in her car. Seems she's finally overcome her fear of driving. Grace takes Henry to the site of the car accident where they visit the roadside memorial for her ex Dominic. There, Grace leaves a ring that symbolized her love for Dominic as if she's ready to move on and leave the past behind. Afterward, things start to work out for Henry and Grace. They spend more time together, Grace begins to hang out with Henry's friends, and the newspaper team successfully publishes their first issue. At this point, it may seem as we're about to witness a happy end for our problematic lovely couple. But hold on, the story is not over yet. Shortly after, we see Henry and Grace arriving at her house. Grace notices her mother's car and asks Henry to wait outside. From there, Henry overhears a heated argument between Grace and her mom. Moments later, the mom storms out of the house, furiously gets into her car, and drives off, accidentally knocking over a trash can in the process. Somebody needs to tell this woman that reckless driving is no joke. Grace drives Henry home. When Henry asks her about what just happened and how he can help, she snaps back at him to stop trying to fix her. At the next newspaper meeting, Grace is a no-show. Henry learns that today marks the 1-year anniversary of the accident Grace was involved in. He tries calling her, but no answer. Henry rushes to her house where he meets Martin, the man who had previously picked up Grace's car. Turns out that Martin is Dominic's father, and Grace has been living with him and his wife this whole time. Martin invites Henry inside and suggests he wait for Grace upstairs. Once in Grace's room, Henry figures it used to belong to Dominic, judging by the contents. Grace returns soon after and explains that she moved in with Dominic's parents because she couldn't stand living with her alcoholic mother and her mother's boyfriend. Henry notices that Grace is holding the same ring she had left at the accident site. They argue again. Henry clearly loves her, but Grace's heart is still with her late boyfriend. It's obvious their relationship is coming to an end. Oh well, I can't say it was unexpected. But cheer up, Henry. She just saved you from a very rocky relationship. Back home, Henry finds solace in his sister Sadie, the only person in the family who truly understands what he's going through, having experienced a heartbreak herself. She reassures him that the pain will pass with time. Later, Henry visits Dominic's grave, burns the poem Grace had him read, and leaves it at the grave. The next day, Henry receives a text from Martin saying Grace is missing. Henry rushes to the abandoned factory. Sure enough, he finds Grace in the pond crying. She's having a nervous breakdown and mistakes Henry for Dominic. She also blames herself for Dominic's death as she had been the one driving the car during the accident. She believes it's her life that should have ended that day, not his. Henry manages to calm her down, telling her that what happened was a tragic but human mistake and she can't blame herself for it. Grace gathers Dominic's belongings and drops them into the pond, then takes off her dress, explaining that it was the one she planned to marry Dominic in. Afterward, Henry takes her home. And just when I thought things couldn't get more dramatic, well, at least no one died. Except Dominic, but that happened before the main story anyway. Back at school, Henry learns that Grace is taking a break, and when she returns, she won't be rejoining the newspaper team. She eventually comes back to school, but Henry keeps his distance. For his final essay, Henry writes about how everyone has experienced the loneliness and fear of being a teenager. He reflects that scars are not signs of what has been broken, but of what has been created. At the end, Henry crosses paths with Grace at school. They share their future plans and hug goodbye. As Grace walks away, Henry notices something in his pocket. The poem he had burned has been put back together by Grace, much like how he repairs his vases. He leaves school, intentionally missing the school bus. His friends decide to skip it too, choosing to walk home with him one last time. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more like this one. Comment what you think I should watch next, and I'll see you in the next video.